There's just so much.
You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on.
Hello and welcome to our third and final episode of Behind the Scenes of Strife, the Binge original series. My name is Jessie Stevens. I am a co-producer on Strife and a writer. I am joined by Mia Freedman, whose memoir Work-Strife Balance was the inspiration for the series. She is also an executive producer, of course. And finally, we have Sarah Scheller, writer, showrunner and executive producer on this season of Strife. Today we are going to cover episodes 7 and 8, plus we're going to have a chat about what's in store for season 2. By episode 7, things have become terrible for Evelyn, and the office it's disintegrating. There's snotty children, there's animals, it's just a complete mess. Storm, who is of course Penny's toddler, who is always in the office due to being too sick to go to daycare. Was Storm fun? Did you get to spend much time with Storm the child?
There was at one point where I think it was Teddy, our script supervisor, said, "I don't think that child wants to be an actor."
So
he
much.
just cried and cried and cried. And then by
I thought
episode...
you were meant to use twins so that you could just sub one in and out when you had
Definitely
it.
for babies, but I think he was over that age threshold,
Okay.
so we didn't. Looking back, we should have got twins. But he was gorgeous and fantastic,
He's
but he
so
was
good.
crying a lot. And then, of course, by episode 8, we wanted him to cry, and he was so happy.
It's funny in a writer's room that you have these big ideas. We had this great storyline where Evelyn, the horse,
Yes,
remember
I
she
was
was
gonna
going to
talk about
have a moment with a horse. Can you tell us the moment? Because somehow this didn't make it.
Well, I don't even remember this. It wasn't even in a
So
draft of a script I saw.
No, it got canned pretty quickly. So then this is what I mean about the writer's room, is that you get swept away and
Also, the show. I quite love that show too.
And often you're sitting there going, I wonder if this is going to get through production. But you don't want to stop the creativity that's happening, and because everyone gets excited and,
Yeah.
you know,
And you build and build.
You're building and building,
Yeah.
and often you need to go around full circle and then you come back to the beginning.
What
and
the fuck was a horse doing?
It was
well,
a
so
shoal
instead of the
horse.
CEO sleep out in 7, episode 7 really for Evelyn is about, there's a moment of ego loss. So instead of the CEO sleep out, her and Lucy were going to go away. So Lucy, I for some reason always wanted to do something cross-country skiing.
That kept coming up. It felt right.
So Lucy had a cabin in the snow. They were
We
going
were
to
going to the
drive down
snow.
for a weekend.
Because snow in Australia is really easy. And
so
then
easy,
we were going to
especially from Sydney.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
And so they go cross-country skiing. Evelyn had to put on like her old 70s, like Lucy's family's old 70s ski gear. Evelyn complains the whole time because it's really hard. Cross-country
Yeah.
skiing, if you've ever done it, is really hard.
yeah, not a lot of payoff in
No,
cross-country skiing.
not a lot of payoff.
Great television. Great television.
And they have a fight, Lucy and Evelyn. Evelyn wants to go back and Lucy doesn't. You're always quitting. So they end up separating. Evelyn gets lost in the snow, is dying for a pee, does a pee and then encounters a wild brumby.
Oh my God.
You didn't see that coming, did you?
I really didn't.
And the brumby pisses all over her.
God.
Yeah, so we needed a wild brumby in the snow to pee on cue.
Were you high this day in the writer's
I
room?
think that it was
We
clearly
might have been
towards the end.
slightly delirious. This is episode 7.
So you're like, and then
And then the horse comes, and then she has this moment with the horse where they're looking at each other and they
Yeah.
like understand each other.
Yeah.
And it was really
And so
deep.
then how does that idea die?
Because that died pretty quickly. I think you came in the next
Bruna
day and
read
you were
the
like,
scene breakdown and said, what the f- Sarah, we're not going skiing.
Because you got to think of cost, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, we had a producer in the room and she was like, I think you might be able to get away with this.
We might be able to get a horse in the snow if we shot in July and
so
kept our
much
fingers
fun.
crossed.
were you at the CEO sleep out scene?
Yeah, I went
Tell
that
me
day.
what that, and you were there.
Yes.
What was it like? Because that was a big production. There were a lot of people there.
I've never seen anything like it.
It was amazing. And it's so funny because Stuart is very cinematic and his visual reference for that scene was the Battle of Atlanta from Gone with the Wind,
That's the most Stuart thing I have ever heard.
which was Scarlett O'Hara walking down across all those dead soldiers or injured soldiers. Do you remember that scene? It was just
Yeah,
like
yeah,
soldier
yeah.
and soldier. So that was his vision.
I had no idea.
With cardboard houses.
Because I've been to a CEO sleep out.
Yes.
I went to one of them one time.
And it was tricky, this, because we didn't want to really make fun of the charities that are doing great work, but at the same token, there's some really crazy things about that CEO sleep out, like pretending to be homeless for a night, and they're always in really expensive puffer jackets.
Yes, and they really don't want to be there. And then
that's not true. In defence of the CEO sleep out, which neither of you have attended. That is not true. We had a whole group of us from Mamamia who went a few years ago. You know, I remember being really pissed off because it was getting trashed on Twitter and, did the police come and kick them and it's not authentic. And I'm like, you know what? We're not perfect, but we all did this and you're at home on Twitter on your warm couches. It was raining. It was the middle of winter. It was like 0 degrees.
We did something.
And I'm not saying we were cosplaying being homeless. It was not like checking into the Four Seasons and
no.
I mean, everything I say now sounds terrible, but on the day, it was an amazing thing because that's when all the Mamamia people could come and be extras, including my kids.
Like, actual beanies made and like there was everything,
the level
all
of
the
detail.
merchandise.
So I turned up to where it was being shot. I didn't go to many of the location shoots. Like I was there for most days when we were shooting the office scenes for the first 4 weeks. But then it got a bit complicated and I, to be honest, lost interest a little bit. And there's a lot of waiting around. And it's also difficult, like when you're on set and you're doing all the scenes. So the CEO Sleep Out was like this big thing and I wanted to see, and all the Mamamia people were there, a lot of them. And it was just amazing. There were like trucks and like cranes and this whole, area of sort of a shipping container. Like it was a full-on production.
It was huge, and it was down at White Bay and
overnight it went.
Yeah, I think I left at like 1 a.m. I think they wrapped at 2 or something.
Oh wow!
Can you talk about the device of having a teacher?
At the CEO Sleep Out, Evelyn encounters Anne-Marie, who's, an older woman, and they have this incredible conversation.
Genevieve Lemon. I couldn't believe that she was cast. She's astonishing.
She's so good, and it's such a shame that she's not in more. Because she's so delicious. But they have this wonderful scene by the water.
And what was the purpose of that whole thing? Like, why did you need to have the device of the CEO sleep out and then her meeting someone else? Like, why did you need to take her out of the environment of the office and the house? And
well, I mean, you need a variety of locations and scenes just to keep the audience engaged, and you need, just fun set pieces. And that CEO, there's a lot of comedy in that night with Lucy and just with the theatrics of it all. There's one little moment where a guy is wheeling like a heater, Everyone's like, is that allowed? So it's just there was some fun stuff.
Like cosplaying homelessness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's Anne-Marie that kind of points that out to Evelyn, and she's, and Evelyn's feeling down. They're sharing a cigarette actually. And she's sort of saying, Australia hates me, following on from what happened with Elizabeth Miles. And Anne-Marie's kind of telling her that, at least she's still in the fight. Be grateful that you're still, because she wishes that she'd worked more. So she sort of gives her the flip.
Yeah, I love that there's regrets no matter what choices you made.
Yeah, because Anne-Marie has children herself, and she's saying that she wished that she'd actually spent more time working. So it's just this nice moment between the two of them, and it just makes Evelyn, just gives her pause, and she just thinks about what she wants to do with the site. The other thing that's going on for her is that, her son is suddenly really into socialism. and that's sort of getting into her head a little bit as well. So she wants it to be a bit more of a collective, and she doesn't want to be the face of it and the leader.
Because of the pressure?
Yeah. It's also on the back of the Elizabeth Miles debacle as well, where she's been crucified and blamed for an election loss. So that plays into it as well.
Because it's a business risk.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So she sort of makes this decision when we start episode 8 that she wants to sell to Peter, with the idea that they're not going to completely take over, that they will buy the company and invest in it, but keep all the staff. So she wants to promote Christine. She wants to still be there, but she wants to step back a little bit. So the taking the photo off the homepage is part of that. The thing that happens with Evelyn all the time is she makes these decisions and then something else happens that completely spins the other direction. And
she realises that whatever happens on that website will fall on her lap. And Mia, you've definitely had those moments where you're trying to have a democracy in terms of ideas, but if something goes wrong, it's Mia Freedman's website. It's not the website of the person out there who made a mistake at midday on a Tuesday. So I think that is a real realisation for her. And there's that incredible pitch meeting where they're saying the worst storylines in Twilight and should Rihanna get back with Chris Brown? And she realises that all of these pitches are critical of women. And she's going, I know what this feels like right now. There was a watershed moment for you, Mia, where you looked at how we were reporting and also how it felt to be reported like that.
Yeah.
And you changed the direction of Mamamia.
Yeah. It was around this time in the culture, a couple of years later, where I was starting to experience a lot of these backlashes personally. And it was a time when media was very outraged, and there was no accident about that. Like in Australia, it was a bit because women were it was, the misogyny speech, and we were sort of jack shit. And it was a time that feminism was very alive in Australia, and women were very energised and sort of activated by the misogyny of Tony Abbott and the way Julia Gillard was treated. But also outrage culture was starting because very specifically that's how the Facebook algorithm worked. And that's the time that Facebook and Twitter changed from being a chronological algorithm to when you just logged on and you saw every post in the order that it was posted of the people you're following, to this algorithm that looked at what content, the idea, of course, is to keep you online as long as possible on Twitter or on Facebook or whatever it is. And the algorithm is designed to do that. And what it started to feed was outrage posts, because all the numbers would show that if something made people angry, they were more likely to comment, they were more likely to share it, they were more likely to click on it. And so that fueled the tail wagged the dog, or the dog wagged the tail, and everyone started creating that content, which meant that if someone would say something, then someone would tweet about it, and then some more people would pile on, and then the mainstream media would write a story about the backlash.
Yeah, it was a backlash story.
The backlash stories became a big thing. And we did that too. And then we realised, when it happened to me, but then you realise so much of backlash often just means someone on Twitter. It became a genre, the backlash story. And we were just like, what's that contributing except creating more outrage culture? So it changed our direction.
I remember you saying, treat these stories like the person at the centre of it's going to read it, because the person at the centre of it's going to read it. So if you're going to write about something Karl Stefanovic said that was a bit stupid, watch your tone, because he's going to read it. I found that really interesting here, that she's realising that she's contributed to something she's now experiencing. The final episode of the season, I reckon this is actually the best episode of the season, written by Sarah Scheller. Outstanding.
It's quite good.
We see Evelyn finally visit Robert. Sarah, what has Evelyn learned about herself throughout this season? Where does she find herself by the end?
The reason that we wanted to do that one in person was because she's going to realise quite a few things about herself that he sort of makes her realise. The most important is probably that she's been seeking her mother's approval.
Yeah.
And that's a big one for her. When she sort of speaks to Ginny about that, Ginny sort of calls her out on it and says, actually, you're seeking your own approval.
I thought that was so beautiful.
Which is really true. And Ginny has this incredible way of, they're so beautiful together.
I could watch a whole show just about them.
Yeah. But she's a really great foil to Evelyn. Evelyn's emotional and reactive, and Ginny's just very measured and calm and just sort of says things that just cut through in the most beautiful way.
And sometimes the most cutting way as well.
Yes, of course.
I love the way you captured the complexity of mother-daughter relationships in that.
Yeah. Robert also sort of mentions to Evelyn that she doesn't talk in linear sentences. She's kind of jumps all over that. I mean, she knows this about herself, but what's most revealing is that he refers her to a psychiatrist and mentions medication. So she leaves this meeting, sort of this session, spiralling a little bit.
Yeah. It's the beginning of something rather than the end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mia, Christine leaves Eve Life to go and run a rival business. You've had the experience of fostering talent, as Evelyn has with Christine, and then them leave and succeed. What's your journey been like with that exact experience, with going, I now have to watch, I've invested, I have taught this person so much. Is there something like disappointing, almost like an assault on the ego?
All of those things. I've learnt a lot. I've learnt so much, and working with groups of women in women's media where your everyday work is to talk about really personal stuff is incredibly intimate. Like you know more things about some of your colleagues sometimes than you do about your friends or members of your family. You know all these kinds of things because, like in a writer's room, there's all the stuff
exactly the same
that you say, right? Yeah. There's no barriers. and often it's turned into content. What I used to do is feel really betrayed and also really scared and really threatened. Now,
because it feels even in this scene, it's you see such an assumed level of loyalty, and it feels like a betrayal, I think, even to the audience. You go, how could Christine do that? And she says that great line, which is, I'm not doing this to you, I'm doing it for me.
Exactly. And that's what I've come to understand. And I'm now on, great terms with all the people that I've worked with. And that is because I now see it as a launch pad. I could not be more proud. And when I say proud, I don't mean to imply a sense of ownership, because I haven't made anyone anything. I've just...
There's something to be proud of, because you go, yeah, I thought I saw something and now I'm so proud of, like, it sounds
kind of validating.
But what I've learned to also go is, the reason that I think when sometimes people leave is a bit like that feminism thing. You have to reject where you came from, because it's like everyone's got incredibly talented in their own right.
Yeah.
And I think that they need to make that disconnection and go and prove themselves. And sorry, they've always proved themselves before they've gone, but to go and be something away from me, away from Mamamia. And I've also seen that creative people need to keep moving. Like they really do. And if you try and limit them, and if you try and push them into this funnel of your own vision of their success or their progression, you can't do that, and it won't work, and no one will be happy. So there are now people who I've worked with who are at every media company,
all levels.
Ironically, people who've worked with us, like Michelle and Zara, who went and started their own media company, Shameless Media, who smash us on the podcast chart sometimes. And we have a group chat with them, and it's like, there's been, like anything, sometimes when you need to break up, you just need a bit of space before you can be friends again.
Yeah.
And I found that. Like, I don't know whether it's like this with everybody who leaves jobs and stuff, but I found when I left magazines as well, I felt that way. I felt that I really had to cut myself off from some people that I'd worked with before I could then go, you know what, we're all in this together.
Yeah, of course. And I think that will happen to Evelyn as well. And I feel like with this episode, there is a bit of a theme of leaving and coming home, and Evelyn is really sort of realising that home can be anywhere, and it's where the people that you love, like she realises that, and this is before Christine's betrayal, but the office is a type of home for her. And we have two little moments, one at the apartment where she looks into her fridge and there's nothing. She's got no milk to make her mother a tea. There's no wine or food or anything. And then later in the episode, she opens the fridge at the office and there's Penny's milk, there's Jeet's leftovers, there's Storm's milk, there's Paul's cheese sticks, there's and it's like, oh, this is full of opportunity and hope. This is, this is the fridge of a family. And so that's really nice. And then her deciding to bird nest, like I think Ginny crystallises this for her in that clock exhibition scene where she says, Addie will come back to you or you'll go back to her. Yeah. And so she sort of decides to bird nest, which is, the children of divorced parents or separated parents stay in the family home and the parents are the ones that come and go, which makes a lot of sense. So she's going to trial that with John, and that's just a really nice, she obviously learns to set some boundaries by the end of the season.
Yeah.
And that's a form of boundary setting.
Can you talk about the friendship with Lucy?
Oh, yeah, we haven't really spoken about it.
No, because, a couple of people that have seen it already, we're recording this before it's out, but some people who've seen it as a preview have really singled that out as being something they loved, that portrayal of female friendship. How did you approach that as writers?
I mean, it's based on a real relationship that you have. One of your best friends is a doctor. But there is something really fun about the trivial nature of what we do being juxtaposed with the life and death stakes that a doctor plays with. And also, and you've spoken to this a lot, Mia, that she's not across what the hell is going on. So you can feel like it's totally, and I've heard journalists talk about this, you feel like the whole world has turned on you and everyone's talking about it. But she totally missed this.
Yeah, she doesn't care.
She doesn't care at all. And in that way, their closeness is distinct from her career and her identity as a writer, I think.
Which is refreshing. But I mean, I agree. I think that relationship, it just pops on screen. I mean, they're so great together.
Like in the CO Sleep Out, like I remember watching them that night, doing those scenes again and again. Found the casting process for Lucy really interesting. Can you explain a little bit about how we approached casting?
All the executive producers and the director, like everyone has opinions about certain roles and who's going to play certain characters. We had an excellent casting agent, Jane, who's based in Melbourne, And we all work together. So, I might suggest somebody for a scene. Asha, she'd just worked with Emma Lung, who plays Lucy. They worked together in Flowers of Alice Hart. I think they worked together before that as well, but she just loved working with her. It's very much about chemistry, especially for a friendship like that, because it has to be believable. You want the relationship to feel fresh enough that it's surprising.
So Asha knew she needed someone who was her equal
exactly
in all of those scenes, and that it was believable that they'd been friends for a really, really long time.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine it's easy to play that role. And Emma was just, I don't know, can you explain the chemistry between them or what they bring to one another?
It was funny when I first saw Emma step on, and I hadn't worked with Emma before, but there's just such a calm. Yeah. She's almost zen-like with her acting.
Which is very doctor-like. It's very, you feel very safe.
But you're right, they felt like equals.
Yeah.
She wasn't intimidated at all by Asha. And of course we had some beautiful young cast that, hadn't worked as much, who you could tell were a little bit intimidated by Asha
Yeah,
Key.
how could you not be?
How could you not be?
Suited them because Evelyn, they should be a bit intimidated by Evelyn.
But Emma was just straight away just on par, and they just have this incredibly natural dialogue. And she's a professional. She was just joyful.
And how did Alex Demetriadis come to be involved? Everyone keeps asking me, does your friend who's the doctor have an open marriage? She doesn't.
No.
This is inspired by. It's not a documentary. How did you come up with that? All that storyline, like what was the purpose of that whole storyline? Because it's so clever.
I think what's funny is that the theme of that ethical non-monogamy thing came up, which has again kind of been in the headlines. And we liked the idea of the sex life being kind of on display.
What's really fun is when you see Evelyn get on her feminist high horse. And so we wanted something that was going to rub with Evelyn. And so straight away when Lucy's like, I thought it was really fun to have a character who just doesn't really care about sex. She's like, she's got 3 kids.
Or
she's a
feminism,
doctor.
really.
Yeah, she's like, she's in her late 40s. She's just like, or mid 40s. She just doesn't really care.
Yeah.
And she loves her husband. She didn't think she was going to react in the way that she does. And in some ways, it's the greatest reaction ever because she can feel something again. She feels like she's just been a bit numb, sexually. And so suddenly she's sort of awakened.
And
but
it was fun.
It's nice that Evelyn thinks it's so anti-feminist.
Yeah. And we could play with the dating apps, which I think was really
because that was new.
To have
in 2012.
Yeah, to have him in there.
Something that we talked about a lot before the writers' rooms, and I don't know where you got to in the writers' rooms, was about Evelyn having a love interest, because that's what you would expect for a show, for a character. There's got to be a love interest. Doesn't every main character need a love interest? Why isn't there one in this season, and how did you arrive there?
We thought it would be more interesting if it was all platonic for Evelyn. Certainly in this season, she's so distracted. She's got so much going on. It just felt like throwing a lover in the mix would have just been way too chaotic.
Seems like she was going to get it on with Peter.
Remember when, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this because I don't know if this is, oh no, it won't come up. But remember we had a whole Christine and Paul thing?
Yeah.
Like that was fun. We didn't keep that in, did we? But Christine and Paul in an alternate
Brumby episode as well. I was going to do it in the office.
You're going to have to write that as fan fiction. Christina and Paul, the universe in which Christina and Paul hook up, because at one time she does say, I'm finding myself more attracted to him.
Yes.
So the little seeds of that was still like,
were being planted.
Maybe season 2.
Exactly. That was really fun. By the end, Christina's left. Norma is writing a book, which looks like an expose.
Norma. We haven't even talked about Norma.
Yeah.
I assume Norma was to really explore the boundarylessness of work friends and mentors and mothers and daughters. Like what were you thinking
And
with
she
that?
was almost, the fact that Addie wasn't staying over at Evelyn's house, she kind of replaced her in a sense.
Because it was easier to have someone who adored her or seemed to adore her.
Yeah, and it just seemed like a logical, she was sleeping at the office for a couple of nights and she had nowhere to go. And it's definitely a boundary crossing,
And she also becomes almost like a Frankenstein's monster because it's like Evelyn has invested so much in her and shown her how to do this. And then that book pitch is something, it's clever. Like it's really clever and it's going to work. And the fact that she finds it, that's a double betrayal that's like, not only am I going to leave you, but I am going to use you.
Oh, you'd feel so vulnerable, wouldn't you?
And Evelyn's been telling her to write your own experiences, you know. So
yeah, and she's clever. She's really clever. Eve Life now has to compete with Peter's new imitation, which will inevitably have more financial backing. And Evelyn is facing the reality that John is looking to date and move on. Sarah, season 2. What can we even say about season 2? Just that there's more to come.
Yeah, there's more to come. I mean, I think
I've got more questions. How do you go about when you know that there's going to be a season 2? Did you know that was going to be a season 2 when you wrote season 1?
No, I didn't.
Okay. And so did you write season 1 and conclude it thinking there might not be a season 2? Because often there isn't.
I mean, you have to think about it. It's crazy not to. So I'm sure we did go, let's keep that for season 2, or let's, that's a great place. We knew that we had a great end for season 1 that had a lot of potential for season 2.
But we knew that was also just the beginning of where women's media and digital media and social media, where that has all gone to. It's just so rich. There were a lot of ideas we came to that would have been anachronistic to put then. It's like we had to park it and go, that wouldn't happen until 2016 or 2020.
Yeah.
So that was fun to save.
Yeah. But then we also wanted, because we did have the idea of sort of jumping forward like 4 years, but then we also want to see the aftermath of Christine's betrayal. So we want to see that website starting. And we want to explore. How do you
approach season 2? Do you go, what do you do? Like, where do you even start?
Well, we're starting a few months back.
No, but I mean even before that as a creative, when you're starting to think and it's like, okay, committed to season 2, we're definitely doing it. Do you gather the same writers? Do you say, where do we want to take these characters? What storylines do we want more of, less of? Like, how do you approach it?
Yeah. So, the first thing we did was, what I did was have a bit of a brainstorm with you and the EPs and just basically a debrief of season 1 and, how it went and what characters we loved and what actors we loved working with. And then we put the room together, and of a 4-week room, we spend the first week brainstorming. So that's just complete blue skying. This is where we could take it. Any writer's got ideas, and we sort of put them all on a board.
And there's a scene cross-country skiing with a horse.
The Brumby's back. The Brumby is so back.
And then we start plotting. So it was, this is a very quick room, but it was like 2 days to plot each episode.
How's season 2 plotting different to season 1 when you're working on the second season of something?
Look, it's great to have all the characters
to know them
and to, very much hearing Ash's voice with every Evelyn line. So that's a huge advantage. You don't have to waste time talking about new characters. I mean, there are some new characters, of course, for season 2 because you want to have fresh blood. Yeah, it's much quicker in that sense.
And I wasn't in these writers' rooms, which was really disappointing. It was in the months just after Luna was born. But to see what they've come up with, it is so exciting. The Office is just so fun.
Yeah.
And there was so much after season 1 that I went, I want to spend more time here and more time there.
So you're still a writer, obviously a producer, but still a writer as well in season 2.
Yeah.
You and Claire will do another episode.
Yeah.
I wanted to jump back and ask who were the hardest roles to cast, because now I'm sort of vague about the casting process because it feels like Opal and Penny and Peter and everybody, Jeet and Norma, they're all exactly who they're meant to be. I can't remember the other ideas we had and who I remember Penny was really hard to cast, and that's not who we expected for Penny. She was a surprise.
Yeah.
But we fell in love with Bryony.
Yeah, completely. I mean, it's a dramedy and, you've always got to put your drama blocks in place before you add your comedy, but you do want funny actors. You do want people that have a good grasp of comedy. And Bryony, who plays Penny, absolutely does. And Stuart had worked with Bryony before. He'd shot an ad in New Zealand with her. So he was like, she's amazing. And she did a tape from New Zealand. And, I was like, oh, great, hire her. She's amazing.
She did an Australian accent in her tape, I seem to recall. How did she end up with her regular accent in the show?
I think that was Stuart and I wanted that because often you find people lose their comedy when they're trying to focus on an accent and they just can't tap into their funny selves because they're concentrating so much on the accent.
Interesting.
So if it's a funny role, I think people are always best to do it in their own accent.
I love it. When you were imagining Penny, Was she briny? What was she?
No, I don't think so. That wasn't in my head.
We thought some sort of earthy mother, like
Yes,
sort of hippie
exactly.
type. Yeah.
We imagined someone who liked children more. And what's great about Penny is how much she doesn't like children. That was a real surprise with the casting process. I will say Penny brought that. And Opal was a surprise too. That's not how I saw Opal.
Right.
How did you
She
see
went
Opal?
through a lot of different iterations. Less edgy. I think like
Yeah.
she was more, to me, a wellnessy, clean-cut. I don't know. I love what this version of Opal has brought. I think it's more complex and exciting.
Yeah, and I think we're going to explore sort of online addiction with
Yes.
Opal next season. And
One of the hardest roles to cast, I remember, was Paul. Because as the only man in the office, and we've had a number of these only men in the office or one of very few men, the thing that I kept saying when we were looking at tapes is that he has to have not 1 ounce of sleaze, like no double entendre, no flirting. He has to be like almost a eunuch. And that's quite a hard thing to do.
It is, and it was a really great note. You were so right with that because it could have just been really creepy.
Like when he's holding the dildo and when he's talking about the tampons, like it needed to be someone that felt like one of the girls, but then we thought to make him gay would be a bit cliche.
Yeah.
So, we decided, or you decided in the writer's room, it would be more interesting to have him a straight guy in that environment.
Yeah.
Because I was always like, you need, one of the funniest things over the years has been that idea of the perspective of the fish out of water.
Yeah.
It needs to be the guy who ends up getting comfortable really quickly talking about, vaginas and dildos and dresses and all these things that he probably wouldn't. And it's got to be as workmanlike about it as someone working in a chocolate factory.
We have a lot of fun with Paul in season 2.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of places to
He's
take
so,
him.
Reese is so funny.
He's so funny. And what I didn't realise until I was on set is Maria, who plays Christine, and Reese, who plays Paul, are best friends.
Yes.
In real life.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So we really should have got
You
them
should
to
have
get it
gotten
on.
together. You still can in season 2 if you
Yeah,
want.
maybe they've got to have a secret affair. All right, I'll speak to Sarah about that privately. Thank you so much for coming along for this mini podcast series with myself, Mia and Sarah. Thank you for investing your time into this podcast, but also the show itself, which we absolutely loved making. We will see you for season 2. And if you came to us from Binge, maybe you've just sat down and watched the whole season of Strife, can I suggest that you become a Mamamia Out Louder? We do Mamamia Out Loud 5 times a week. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we do our episodes, and then Tuesday and Thursday are subscriber specials. It is myself, Jessie Stevens, Mia Freedman, and Holly Wainwright. We are Australia's biggest news and pop culture podcast, and we would love to have you. So come and check out what we do. Bye.